All right, welcome to another episode of the Brain Food Show. Today, well, what are we talking about today? It's stupid people? Really stupid people?
I mean, kinda, yeah. A couple of dumbbells is probably some element that'll go into the title.
I was reading through the notes that you prepared before we started recording today. And the number of times I felt like, because we use a Google Drive document together, the number of times I almost highlighted the text and like put in a comment in the side of like, really? Really? Exclamation point, question mark.
Yeah, pretty much. Sort of a non-murder mystery that took the cops no time at all to figure out what had happened.
No, as everyone will see, it's very easy to see why.
Mm-hmm.
But where are we starting? Are we quick facting it first?
We are quick facting it, and
hit me.
Yeah, we're gonna go with Capone on this one, and Al Capone, and how did he actually get his scars to get the nickname Scarface? So Capone himself would actually long claim that he got them fighting in France during World War I. But that's not actually the case. He actually got them when he was 18, working as a bartender and a waiter and a bouncer at the Harvard Inn, owned by a mobster named Frankie Yale. And so the story behind this is much less heroic.
This seems more Capone.
Yeah, much less heroic than a war story. Essentially, what happened was one Frank Galluccio came into the bar with his date, Maria Tanzo, and his sister, Lena. And Capone really liked the sister, Lena, and he kept trying to get her to talk to him and, go for a walk with him on the beach and stuff, and she just kept turning him down. And so finally he just continues. And finally, Lena gets really annoyed and tells her brother about the annoying guy who keeps bothering her. So Galluccio then, he tells the ladies to go outside. He's going to take care of this issue, this Capone who's bothering his sister. And then, so as Lena is leaving, however, Capone escalates the situation by reportedly yelling out loudly,
"I'll tell you one thing, you got a nice ass, honey, and I mean that as a compliment."
Naturally, Galluccio didn't take kindly to this, Capone saying this, and then Capone just tells him, so he demands Capone go and apologize, and Capone refuses and says he was only joking around. Now, it should be noted here that Capone was much bigger than Galluccio. Galluccio was only 5'6" and kind of a skinny little guy, and Capone was a very beefy, very muscly 5'11". And so rather than try to fight him, hand to hand, instead Galluccio just pulls out a knife and slashes Capone's face and his upper neck with the knife, and then proceeds to sprint out of the Harvard Inn with Capone laying in a bloody heap on the floor. So the Capone was then taken to the hospital. He got, it's reportedly 80 stitches and he ended up being,
Lord.
Yeah, that's a lot. They were some good gashes. And so,
yeah, he had quite a scarred face.
Yeah.
In the photos. It's not a joke.
Yeah. And so this, of course, mobster Frankie Yale, who owned the inn, he demanded the meeting to sort of settle the issue between Capone and Galluccio. And so in the end, he demanded that Galluccio pay Capone $1,500 for the trouble with the scars, which that's about $27,000 today. And in return, Capone had to promise to never retaliate in any way for the thing. And this also worked out for Yale because Galluccio didn't have that amount of money to pay Capone. So instead, Yale gave him the money to give to Capone. And so now Galluccio is in the mobster Yale's debt and with interest, and also, now kind of worked for him a little bit. So that settled the matter.
Works out well for that guy.
Yeah, that settled the matter. And that's how Capone actually got his scars.
What? Did they not have police?
When you're
I feel like they're the people who normally sort out these sorts of issues.
Yeah, well, when you're like a mobster who definitely, they probably didn't, and nobody involved wanted to get the police over, probably.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. $27,000 is a lot of money. How old was the guy? 18?
Capone was 18.
Capone was 18.
I'm not sure how old Galluccio was at the time.
Either way, $27,000, that feels a bit heavy.
Yeah. He almost killed him, though, so,
That's true.
The gash to the neck could have been fatal.
I wonder what happened to Galluccio.
I don't know.
He's indebted to this kind of gangster guy. I bet that's just, now he works for him. That's just how he gets him into his organization and gets him loyal.
Yeah.
It's probably be like, oh yeah, the interest is also real high.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway, so this crime, the stupid people and their inability to cover up murders.
Yeah. despite
Should
a
we get
pretty
into that?
despite a pretty elaborate plan in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Elaborately stupid, but in various ways, the execution could have been better. So yes. So we're going back to this.
Literally.
This was actually another one of the early trials of the 20th century. That was one of the early ones called the trial of the century. On the what was
There's
that?
so many. Didn't we already cover one?
Yeah,
trial
that
of the
one was
century?
the first one to be called that prominently. But this one was also kind of took the nation by storm for various reasons. I mean, it involves a housewife who going to murder her husband with and having an affair with this other guy. And she was kind of painted as a seductress and like getting the other guy to help and stuff using her womanly ways, which a lot of the newspapers would say. But actually, this is all the stories of.
I really feel they were very naive.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the woman kills her husband and she was a seductress. And I'm like, whoa, guys, you have no idea what is coming up in the rest of this century.
Yeah, but the thing is when I first researched this one, I was like, oh yeah, the story everyone says. I'm like, yeah, she sounded like kind of an idiot, and this guy is kind of an idiot and whatnot, and letting her control him or whatever. But then I was curious. I was like, well, no one's ever actually saying her side of the story, like at all, anywhere. None of the news accounts, nothing. And I'm like, what is her side of the story? Like, and when you actually read that, it's like, no, they were probably both like equally involved. Like there was no forced here. This was probably like just something they schemed up on together. And she looks a bit more of a sympathetic character in some ways, which I added quite a bit. As you know, we were supposed to record this last week, but I added a bunch at the last minute because I was like, oh no, we need to incorporate some of her side of the story in because no one else really talks about that. And still kind of an idiot and all that, but a little more. You kind of feel sorry for her a little more when you look into the whole story.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
So going back to the 1920s, and so this is a Long Island woman. She's a housewife named Ruth Snyder. And at this point, leading up to the murder, she had actually made several attempts, allegedly, to kill her husband, Albert, including she twice tried to kill him via disconnecting the gas line on their oven. Then that didn't work. She tried...
How does the guy stick around? It's like, wow, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
It became disconnected twice.
Yeah. And then...
at that point, I'd be like, someone is trying to kill me.
Yeah, no, just wait. There's more.
I know.
So she then tries running the car in the garage with the garage door closed in the hopes it will, fill the house with, carbon monoxide and kill him. That didn't end up working. She then poisoned his bootleg whiskey, but rather than drink it, he dumped it out because he noted it tasted awful. So this is something we're going to get into in a future episode. This is actually something the U.S. government did around this very same time to stop people from drinking. They poisoned the supplies of a lot of the bootleg, or a lot of the supply of alcohol that the bootleggers were stealing and stuff. They intentionally poisoned them, and they knew the bootleggers would use it in this way and sell it. And this resulted in the death of over 10,000 Americans very quickly. And
oh my God!
And as the death count started rolling in, and all these people were showing up to the hospital, in these symptoms, and then dying not long after, the program became, they'd already been promoting that they were doing this to try to get people to stop, but then people were doing it anyways. But then
they were intending to kill people or just make them sick.
The intention was, the poison, it would kill you if you drank it, and so they thought it would be a deterrent. If people would know that some of these supplies of alcohol that the bootleggers were stealing and using would be poisoned, and so that people would stop drinking. But people didn't.
No, this is crazy.
Didn't stop drinking, and so a lot of them died. And so instead of like, oh, we need to stop this program because this went further than we thought. No, if you can actually go read the congressional notes and stuff, and they actually debated whether they should ramp up the program to get rid of the, all the undesirable drinkers and whatnot. So we'll have.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and this is quite supported by. This was hotly debated on both sides. It's like, well, these people are doing this illegal thing and all that. And of course, at this point, you have to understand, like, leading up to Prohibition, so many of the problems with the nation and the world basically were pinned on alcohol. And so it was like, yeah, these people are like awful because they're, continuing to drink, and they're the problem with society, so why not get rid of them? And this was also a time when like eugenics and stuff was hugely popular across the world and all that. So the idea wasn't, so yeah, it was just hotly debated, and we'll get into it fully on a future episode because it's kind of a fascinating thing.
Yeah, that's really intense. I mean, I kind of think the conspiracy theorists or whatever. It's all of this stuff. And they're saying, oh no, the government did intentionally poison 10,000 people.
Yeah,
that's pretty. Although at least they were like, yes, we have poisoned all of this stuff. So there's not really a conspiracy. That's just crazy.
That's the thing about the actual conspiracies is it's just impossible to keep a lid on the things, because as soon as you involve very many people at all, which almost all conspiracy theories, like those sort of things always have to involve sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, and it's just like
they've got to be grand, otherwise they're not interested.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, well, yeah, but if that was really the case, then there would be no way to keep it secret at all. And then they'll always go, oh, but there was that one guy who said this, and he knows what he's talking about. Like,
out of the tens of, like the moon landing, the tens of hundreds of thousands of people possibly who knew about this and worked on this in some way.
Yeah. And often it also would require, a lot of the conspiracy theories would require governments across the world working together on it over spanning decades. And it's like,
we've already proven we can't do that at all.
Even just one government can't agree on something, let alone, all of them together, like collaborating. Anyways.
I don't have an enormous amount of faith in the just general competency of governments.
Exactly. And then spanning decades with multiple, people in the government over time. It's like, what do you have? Like you get like indoctrinated, you come in and it's like, all right, now here's the thing we're actually doing for we've been doing it for decades.
and then like a couple of decades later, all of the declassified documents then put out.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? So we faked all of that stuff as well, just at the time, because we know that come on, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But
rant's over. We can move.
There are actual conspiracies like this one, but they always come out and are always like, a little, you just can't keep them a secret and all that. So anyways, going back.
They didn't even try to get this, just keep this a secret.
The whole point was not to make it a secret. Like the whole point was to let everyone know. And it definitely, came to more public attention once all the people started dying. That became more front page news type stuff. But still, anyways, we'll talk about that one later. I thought about adding it completely to this, but then it was a little bit of a tangent too far. So
let's do it another time. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
And by fun, I mean terrible.
Yeah. Well, when it is like a century old, it's like the 10,000 deaths don't seem quite as. It more just seems like bizarre. Rather than tragic.
Something to laugh about. Bizarrely, rather than like, oh my god, the American government did that. So but all these people died.
Like literally like 10,000 people. In any event, going back to Ruth, so she tried to poison his bootleg whiskey. That one should be unsuccessful. Maybe if this program had been around, I'm not sure. I can't remember the exact date. So maybe it was already around. Maybe that one she would have actually gotten away with it. But either way,
she could have used the same poison or something.
And just
be another one of the casualties.
It is one of them.
That'd be a great way to kill someone then.
Yeah, totally.
Like if you just wanted to like knock someone off, great way to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure someone out there got that bright idea and did just that.
It's like 9,995 deaths caused by the government and 5 people murdered.
Just great. So another instance, while Albert was sick, she started adding various drugs to the medicine he was taking, just hoping some combination of it would kill him. And yet another incident, she supposedly carjacked. He was under the car at the time, and she released the carjack. It didn't end up crushing him or anything, so he ended up surviving that one too. All unsuccessful attempts. And so why was she trying to kill her husband in the first place? It turns out the now not so happy couple originally met when she was working at Cosmopolitan magazine, and she cold called Albert. And Albert kind of lost his temper and yelled at her, as sometimes you do when the telemarketers call. Pretty quickly, Ruth apologized for calling, and then Albert, he felt bad because she was very polite about the whole thing, and he explained to her that his fiance had actually just recently died of pneumonia, and so he was not in a good mood, and that sort of thing. So it later would turn out that more of that was just sort of his general temperament, but at the time that was his excuse. So the next day,
Albert was kind of a
basically. And so Ruth calls again the next day, and they just get to talking. And so eventually, he actually gets her a job at the magazine he works for, Motorboating Magazine, and she works as a secretary. And not long after, in 1915, they get married, and then it was all downhill from there. So, in 1917, first, Ruth gets pregnant, and rather than be super excited about that, first child and all that, Albert, he wasn't happy at all. He didn't want kids. He had no interest in kids, didn't want them. And he eventually was like, all right, well, at least if it's a son, I'll have a son. It'll be awesome. And then it turned out to be a daughter named Lorraine, I believe it is. Don't have it in notes here, but later I'll confirm or deny that. I believe it was Lorraine. And then, so yeah, he wasn't happy about it, that he was not shy about expressing his dissatisfaction with her giving birth to a daughter and, having a kid at all.
Wow.
Yeah. So
his daughter's going to do great. That's going to be a happy childhood.
No, and this one is like people all over are going to be like, yeah, that Albert dude, he deserved to die. Because the next up, who does this? So he had the habit of comparing his wife, Ruth, to his dead fiancée, Julie Gouchard.
Oh my gosh.
And to quote him, he stated that Julie was
the finest woman I have ever met.
And like to frequently tell Ruth this about his dead fiancée. And then he would also constantly berate Ruth for not basically being as good as Julie was at everything. Just anything, he would just compare her constantly to Julie and how Julie was better than her. Oh, and on top of this, he hangs a portrait of Gouchard, Julie Gouchard, up in their home rather than his wife. And he also names his boat after Julie and not his wife. And and then on top of that, like we said, he was very moody, ill-tempered. He also enjoyed just being at home kind of by himself, tinkering on his boat and his car and that sort of thing. Whereas Ruth was very extroverted, loved going out and doing things and hanging out with friends and, that sort of thing. But she never got to do this with Albert because he had no interest in it. And, being a housewife at the time, she just kind of had to stay home and mope around. So ultimately, Ruth, her father dies, and this results in the mother, Josephine Brown, coming to live with Ruth and Albert. And so this actually did allow Ruth to start going out and doing stuff sometimes, because her mom would just watch the daughter sometimes and let her go out and hang out with friends and stuff and meet people in this. So that was like an improvement. But her mother very quickly saw the way their relationship was, the way Albert treated her, and the way just they didn't get along at all and fought all the time. And so she actually, despite the stigma at the time, she told her daughter she should divorce her husband,
Good
walk
advice.
away. Yeah, because this was always going to end badly at some point. So she didn't want to take this advice. Instead, she went with, kill him instead. And so why do this? So there was the scandal of divorce at the time.
Divorce is really bad.
Yeah, back then. And, the woman wouldn't have much of any way of support themselves after that, especially being a divorcee and being the initiator of the divorce. She also had some concern that she would lose custody of her daughter in the divorce proceedings if she left. But on top of that, speaking of the support, Albert actually had 3 life insurance policies. One of them was Ruth got him to get, and the other 2 were ones that were forged by Ruth and a man we'll talk about shortly.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So the total...
So not only all these multiple attempts to kill her, it's like, do I really need 3 life insurance policies?
Yeah, exactly. So the total of all of them was about $80,000 or about $1.1 million today.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So life insurance policies.
Yeah.
Life insurance policies in place. All attempts to murder him thus far unsuccessful. She decides to bring in someone else to help her out. You see, at the time, she was using her time away from her daughter when her mom was watching to good use, and met a guy named Henry Judd Gray starting in 1925. And he was a lingerie salesman. That's how they met. Oh. And who also detested his spouse for basically the exact same reasons Ruth hated her husband. And they also had similar age daughters, so they had a lot in common, and they got along very well, and quickly started having an affair. And so this brings us to sort of the widely accepted version of events, which again, I think are a little unjustly unfair to Ruth. I think it seems more clear that they were probably both involved equally and whatnot. And she was not quite the seductress and all that, and manipulating Judd, the guy she was having an affair with, so much. It was probably more of a mutual dumb idea that they had together to get the life insurance money and get rid of the husband. So, but the widely accepted version is that Ruth, she convinces Judd to help murder. And so she says, hey, we should do this thing. And Judd supposedly he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. And so she continues to pressure him, supposedly, and all this. And so finally, when the pressuring doesn't work, she decides instead, supposedly, to tell Judd that she is going to tell his wife of the affair if he didn't help. This supposedly worked and agreed, but that doesn't quite make sense, because if she tells Judd's wife of the affair, then Albert's going to know about the affair too. Yeah. And then she risks losing her daughter, which does seem to be like a thing when you read her accounts. Like, this was something she was legitimately worried about in the divorce scenario and the whole affair scenario. So it just doesn't, it seems more likely that this wasn't quite how it actually happened. But, you know, everyone accepted Judd's version of the story, which was that it was all her idea.
Okay.
And you'll see the court and the news accounts. Judd was like a saint when you read them. Like I only included, I think, 1 or 2 in here, but like universally, they're all just painting Judd as this amazing person and Ruth as this, you know, evil woman and whatnot.
Well, I remember reading the first version of this, and it was like, oh yeah, I definitely had a pretty negative opinion of Ruth.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, okay, no, she doesn't seem so bad.
No, I mean, not the brightest in the world, but, you know, not the best decision making. Maybe is the better way to say that. But yeah, you know, she needed to get rid of her husband. He was awful. And yeah.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
So yeah.
That just to be clear, that doesn't mean I endorse murder.
No.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Kill your husband, says Simon.
Yeah, so on that note, if all this seems pretty dumb, this would become known as the dumbbell murder case very shortly after things went down.
Does dumbbell mean stupid? But to me, a dumbbell is the thing you lift.
Yeah, dumbbell does mean dumb as well. Stupid.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah, so we should also point out that Ruth noted that in her version of things, which is, you know, never told, she says Judd was actually having affairs with many women and that...
He was a lingerie salesman.
Yeah, and who hated his wife. So, yeah, traveling salesman, no less, so that, you know, get away with it a little more. And then
it's like traveling salesman, probably prone to affairs. Traveling lingerie salesman.
Yeah.
Come on, Judd. You know what's up.
Yeah. So she says Judd actually eventually started, you know, threatening to tell about the affair and whatnot to get money out of her and all this.
And he hates his wife.
Yeah. He hates his wife. And so who knows what exactly the actual correct thing. I don't know. It seems to me like...
Why was he painted as such a hero? Like, I remember reading this before and Judd was amazing.
Yeah.
But why did everyone like him so much? Was he just charming or something?
I think it just made a better story in the news, because you'll see a lot of the news accounts, they seem to be more, a little bit like the tabloid magazines, you know, like that you see on the grocery store, like right there that have all these outlandish things about celebrities and stuff. This case definitely became that. It was like, oh, this perfect family, right? It's just a typical American family, but no, look at this, like the woman's like this adulteress and she's murdering her husband and it made like a really great story. Whereas like the guy having an affair, like, well, that's what like a lot of guys back then did, like all the time, especially like you say salesmen and traveling salesmen. So it was like, it was lingerie salesman. Yeah, it was kind of a non-story. Whereas the angle that was taken with her, because even a lot of the accounts were like, oh, she's just like incredibly intoxicatingly beautiful woman. But if you actually go look at the pictures, she wasn't really, and that was just made up just to, you know, it made the story better and whatnot. So it seems more like it was just, it made a good story and everyone kind of ran with it, and you know.
All right, yeah, gotta love the media. Yeah,
they were just as inaccurate back then, if not more so, because they could get away with it so much easier.
Yeah, fact checking must have been tricky.
Yeah, exactly. How are you going to know, especially when all the newspapers are saying like the same type of stories and everything?
And the law certainly less developed in regards to that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever the case, March of 1927, the pair, so they've been having an affair for about 2 years up at this point. They decided to follow through on the plan to kill Albert Snyder. Again, contradictory accounts and all that. They're both trying to paint the whole thing as the other person's idea, and even in their stories about how it actually went down, that it was the other person who did the murder. And, you know, in Judd's case, he tells it where like he tried and then kind of failed. And so then she steps in and does the actual murder. In her case, she's like, yeah, I was in the bathroom at the time. I thought he had left. And so, you know,
it's a weak excuse.
Yeah, they're probably both lying, and it was probably mutual, one would think. But either way, the generally accepted one is that Ruth, well, this is kind of how it started either way. So Ruth was out with Albert and their 9-year-old daughter. Oh, it was Lorraine. So they're out for the evening. They go out. They're out pretty late. I think it was like 2 a.m. at a party or something. So the Judd enters in the home. Ruth left the door unlocked for him to come in, and he goes and hides in the spare bedroom. And then when they come back, Albert and Lorraine, they go to sleep. And so then Ruth goes and meets with Judd. And then they go into the master bedroom together. They've got a chloroform soaked cotton and also a window sash weight that Judd he'd purchased. It's just kind of a weight to hold a heavy thing to, hit someone over the head with, which is exactly what they would do. So Judd claims the story that that's accepted by the court and everything is Judd claims he takes the weight and bashes Albert over the head with it, but instead of actually killing him or knocking him out, it actually just wakes him up. So if that's the case, they might as well have just gone with the chloroform right away because he was sleeping. That would have been more effective. Yeah. But either way, so supposedly he wakes up, he yells for help, and then that is when Ruth, according to Judd, grabs the weight out of Judd's hand and then smashes her husband's head with it, and that's what actually probably killed him, according to Judd. So, of course, in this case, it makes it look like she actually did the murder, and he was just kind of, there at the time, so it helps him to maybe avoid the death penalty, which is probably what he was going for. So, but Ruth, again, she claims that she actually, when it finally came to it, was like, no, you need to leave. We're not going to do this. And so he says, okay, I'm going to leave. So then she goes to the bathroom to kind of get ready for bed again. And then she claims that's when that's when Judd did the murder of Albert on his own when she was in the bathroom. Probably neither of those are perfectly accurate. Either way, for good measure, whoever did the bashing with the weight, there was definitely that because there was, he had fracture in his skull and everything. So they, just for good measure, they also tied a wire around his throat and used a pencil to twist and tighten it to strangle him. Then they stuffed chloroform-soaked cotton up his nostrils and in his mouth.
Okay.
So he's definitely not living through, any one of those would probably be sufficient. And this was...
they already smashed him in the head, right?
Yeah, and he's, unconscious, bleeding with a fractured skull, so,
It's not a good time.
Yeah, not good. So then they walked through the house, scattered some things around. They were trying to make it basically look like it was a robbery, but of course, why would the robbers go to such elaborate methods to try to kill the person in there? So either way, they're scattering stuff around
and just kill the husband.
Yeah, exactly. They're hiding very
brutally.
They take the various valuables around, and so they hide them to make it look like they're stolen, but like they hide them in the house, and so you can see how that one's going to turn out. So they finish by Henry or Judd as he went by. He loosely binds Ruth and gags her, and then he leaves. So after some time passes, Ruth, she would tell the authorities, who would later show up, that she was unconscious during the time because she claimed she had also been hit in the head and knocked out. So she wriggles to the door of her sleeping daughter's room and bangs her head up against the door until Lorraine wakes up. Lorraine comes out, she removes the gag, and supposedly she tries to remove the ties to actually unbind her mother, but Ruth says, no, go get the neighbor. So it would seem here that she was very keen on having the neighbor actually do the untying.
To discover it, sure.
Yeah, because maybe, thinking the testimony of a 9-year-old girl would not be as good as a neighbor having done the unbinding.
Yeah.
Either way, as you might imagine, the police are soon called after the neighbor comes and unbinds and finds the husband dead and everything. So the police aren't buying it like immediately because Ruth was super calm about the whole thing. Not distraught at all over the fact that she had supposedly just been bashed in the head, knocked unconscious, tied, bound, gagged by a couple Italians, guys.
And a husband horribly murdered. Like brutally, all that. And so they're kind of like, well, this is weird that she's so calm. And so, and there's also no sign of forced entry into the home or anything like that. They didn't even do.
Yeah. And so they also, the police call one Dr. Harry Hansen to look over Ruth because she said she'd got bashed in the head. But when he looked her over, there was zero signs that she had taken a blow to the head at all. Like not even the slightest little red mark anywhere. So like another way that maybe they didn't quite think through their plan, there should be at least like a bruise or something.
Yeah. I've seen enough movies to know, there's, in so many movies that scene, it's like, all right, man, you got to punch me in the face. Yeah. Just punch me in the face. Punch me in the face. I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
And they punch the guy in the face and he's like, again.
Yeah.
Just to make it look like he got bloodied up.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the police find Albert's revolver, which had been placed beside him on the bed. But like, so it seemed to them more like
why didn't he use it?
Yeah, why didn't he use it? If he had a revolver and these unarmed burglars didn't, what was he doing with the gun? And so they kind of determined that it seemed more likely that it was placed there to make it seem like he had, used the gun in defense. And then as they're searching, they find the valuables that were supposedly stolen.
Yeah. This had to happen.
Yeah, the jewelry, for instance, was just hidden under the mattress of the bed. Not even like well hidden.
You could have just thrown it in a field.
Yeah.
You could have just anything. Literally anything.
Exactly. And so then the police actually tell her,
throw it in a lake. Throw it down a well.
Yeah, or
flush it down the toilet. Come on.
Have Judd take it or something. He can give it back later or something. And so they tell her that it looks like it was actually a fake. They say it doesn't look like this was actually supposed to be a robbery. This looks like someone was actually targeting to kill Albert. And
This guy's Sherlock Holmes to figure that out.
And so she supposedly replies, according to the reports,
"How can you tell?"
Yeah.
How can you tell?
Yeah. So then the police's big break, the thing that really got things going, and was they found actually a memento Albert had of his former fiancée, Jessie Gouchard. And so what did this have to do with the murder? How did this actually get, the things start being revealed? And so it turns out this memento simply had the initials JG on them. And if we should point out again here that Henry Gray's nickname was Judd, so Judd Gray. And so when the police asked Ruth if she knew anything about a JG, so they thought it actually must have been like maybe a lover of Albert's or something. And so she reportedly replied,
"What about Judd Gray? Has he confessed?" Oh, this woman.
Yeah, so...
just don't. There's a great video on YouTube called "Why the Police Will Always Beat You in the Interrogation Room."
Yeah.
Have you seen this?
Yes, it was great. There was that lawyer and then the police investigator guy who does the interrogation. It was like, in no way is talking to the police ever going to benefit you, ever. Like,
yes, anything, do not talk to the police.
It can only make it worse. Their job is their job is to gather evidence, basically, against you. And so, like, just don't. Just, yeah.
It drives me insane whenever this happens in a movie and someone just, they're like, "We know you did it, so it's time to start negotiating." Just... get a lawyer.
Yeah, well, and that was the other thing that pointed out in that video is the police they're not involved in the negotiation. It's not their, it's not what they do. They're involved. They're getting evidence, so they can't negotiate with you like that. That's for others, prosecuting attorneys and things to work out with your lawyer. So yeah, that is an interesting video to watch, both the presentation from the lawyer and the police interrogator. Who, again, like as he points out, the police are they're professionals. They're really good at getting information out of people. And they can lie all they want. And that's another thing. People think they can't lie, but no, they can totally just lie. And yeah.
And it's also just, the other thing that struck me is, even if you've done nothing wrong, even if you have nothing to do with it, don't say anything.
Yeah, because it never benefits you at all. And yeah, it was fascinating to hear some of his techniques of getting people to admit to stuff, like where I think there was one he was talking about like a rapist or something, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, she was pretty hot though," like trying to get like he's on the guy's side or whatever. And so the guy was like, "Yeah, right." And it's like, and then he admitted to his crime, and then it was like, "Oh, gotcha."
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. It was fascinating.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, it was just fascinating, like the lengths he would go to, and he was really good at his job. This guy. Yeah. Interesting.
She was pretty hot, right? Yeah, I know. That's why I raped. Damn it!
That's basically what it seemed like happened.
Yeah. I was actually talking about a different video, but I've also seen the one.
Oh, really? What are you talking about?
I'll send you a link.
Yes.
It's by a channel called Coffee Break.
Oh, you've mentioned that channel before. I've not actually seen that one.
It's very good. They just got into a big bit of trouble or whatever, like YouTube drama with Kurt Sagat in a nutshell, which was interesting. I probably spent too much time on Friday reading the comments about that, but
I've not heard this at all.
There was something about this is kind of inside YouTube's baseball stuff. Maybe it's less interesting to our general audience, but the short of it was this guy was making a video about a video Kurt Sagat had made, saying that it really wasn't researched well enough and that this kind of gave like a bad impression. I think it was mental health. And he was kind of calling them out on it, but he wanted them to chime in before he made the video, kind of calling them out. And they did. And then he basically thought, and I'm not sure I'm getting all the details 100% right here, but he basically thought that they made a video describing their research process and published it like 2 days before they, he just seemed to be, to Coffee Break's impression, it seemed like he was just pushing, the guy who owns Kurt Sagat was just pushing the interview back so he could get this video done and explain himself before Coffee Break's video came out. But it seems, the general consensus seems to be in the comments, but you never really know, that it was just a coincidence and Coffee Break was kind of a bit harsh. But either way, it's a good channel.
Yeah.
It's a great channel.
I like, in a nutshell, I've not seen Coffee Break, but everybody gets stuff wrong sometimes. It's impossible not to. As long as the effort's there. And I think, at least I haven't watched a in a nutshell video in a long time, but They always seemed pretty good on the ones I have seen.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
No one bats 1,000, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Going back to
where were we?
What about Judd Gray? Has he confessed?
How did we get there?
Yeah, I think the police thing and all that.
Okay.
All right, so soon enough, now that they have the name Judd Gray, they're looking for Judd Gray. And so they find him staying at the Syracuse Hotel, which is, I don't remember how far away that is. It's away. He had to take a train anyway. So the police go there to arrest.
He couldn't have taken the jewelry.
Yeah. So they go there to arrest Gray, and he initially is like, what are you talking about? I've been at this hotel the whole time. And he, again, in their sort of dumb way of, planning things out, he did have an alibi. He had a friend of his named Haddon Gray, which is not related to him at all, but just had the same last name. So mailed 2 letters to Judd's wife from the hotel that day to make it appear that he had been there the whole time. But you can see the problem here is, well, then Haddon Gray is going to know, later that when he finds out, he's going to know
he was in on it.
He's going to be like, wait a minute, alibi. You murdered this person, right? And you're using me as an alibi. So even if this alibi had stood up, there's a weak point, and that Haddon Gray could just come out and be like, no, it was me who did this. I mailed the letters. I don't know anything about what they were doing. But so at the time, Judd told him that he was just off visiting his girlfriend, which maybe gives some more insight into the character of Judd, who can just casually tell his buddy, I'm going to go visit my girlfriend. Would you mind covering for me at the hotel? Mail some letters.
Classic Judd.
Yeah. Haddon Gray being the best wingman in the world there.
Yeah.
But so Haddon actually, he goes and lies to the police initially about it. And, and he's like, no.
Good wingman.
Yeah, he's great until he finds out about the murder. And then he was like, whoa. No, I mailed the letters. That was totally me. And so the other problem here is that Judd, so he's leaving the Snyder house after the murder, and he's going, and literally down the block, he asks a policeman for directions to the train, after the murder, and so the policeman gives him directions. Later, the policeman remembered having this guy ask him for directions to the train. And then when he got off the train, he used a taxi to get to the train to the hotel. And the police were able to track down the taxi driver, who also remembered the guy getting off the train from the town. So, so this...
You could have put on a wig or a fake pair of glasses or something.
And definitely don't ask...
anything. Don't ask the dead policeman.
Yeah, a block away from the house that you just committed a murder. So he finally, so the police also, again, getting back to the police can totally lie if they want in trying to get the confession, is they say Ruth has confessed, even though she hadn't confessed at this point. And so once that, they have all this evidence against him, they're telling him, and they say, Ruth has confessed, you might as well just confess too. And so then he changes.
Did he confess?
He did. He changes his tune and he confesses and he says, Ruth made him do it. It was all her fault. And so this, on the other side, they then go to Ruth and they say, hey, Gray has confessed. And so she's then also confesses, blames Gray for the whole thing. It was his fault, all his idea. So they put on trial May of 1927, both pointing fingers at each other again and just saying the other one corrupted each other. But the public and the jury, pretty much everyone, sided. Even the police involved, detectives interviewing him were actually like, this Judd, he just seems like a really nice guy. So,
wow.
Yeah, they everyone involved was like, Judd's a great guy, Ruth is the devil, basically. So here's one quote from the Herald Tribune noting,
he was a Red Cross worker in the World War. He was an assiduous worker for the Sunday school of the First Methodist Church, was quiet-mannered in the home and a local country club man. He golfed and bridged and motored. He was a member of the Orange Lodge of Elks. Alrighty. All facts now adduced point to a love-mad man completely in the sway of the woman whose will was steel and brain active and intelligent. She dominated him, police said, and forced her will upon him even when he desired to back out on some of her proposals.
Yeah. And
I love how motored used to be a hobby.
Yeah.
He golfed and bridged and drove a car.
Yeah. And if you read a lot of their accounts, there's tons of them on this because it was quite a sensational thing that, everyone was quite interested in. And they're all like this. So Judd's a saint and she's the devil and just a seductress and all that, and corrupted this great guy, So the district attorney himself would ring in on Gray, noting he was
a decent, red-blooded, upstanding American citizen.
Yeah, other than the fact that, of course, he took part in a murder and cheated on his wife with lots of different women and, all that. He was a great guy.
What? Why did everyone like him so much? Do we know? Like, for sure? He was just
I don't know, maybe
cool?
he was just very, I mean, it was a traveling salesman. He was probably pretty personable and good talking to people and stuff, you would think.
Wow, you can get away with a lot with that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you're charismatic, yeah, you can get away with it. Charismatic and good looking will get you away a lot in court. Like, have you seen those studies and stuff where, like, if you're a good looking person, well dressed, how much more likely you are to get off from crimes?
Yeah, I can 100% imagine.
Yeah,
and I can imagine, I would certainly have biases.
Yeah, and pretty much everyone does. It's basically, and if you look like a crazy person or something, you're, even if you were completely innocent, you're more likely to get convicted and all that. The look makes a big difference. But in any event, so everybody likes that Judd, and everybody hates Ruth. She was sort of portrayed as like Eve offering the apple to Adam and everything, corrupting him. And so eventually, the jury, they go and they deliberate for less than 2 hours, and they decide that, in the end, they think Gray, his version of things, is correct. But they do actually find them both guilty and sentence them both to death. And this was the thing. It was actually kind of expected that Judd might actually just be convicted and, have to serve some sort of, life sentence or whatever, but not be sentenced to death.
Yeah.
And that it would just be Ruth that would be executed. But it turns out they both were deemed going to be executed because they both took part in it.
But Judd's so cool.
Yeah, he's such a cool guy. Why would you want to kill that guy?
He's a red-blooded American male.
I know, right? So
he's the best.
The other thing about this, that was surprising.
I love Judd.
Yeah, who doesn't? Yeah. So the other thing that was kind of surprising about this
Judd
was that Ruth, as evil as she was portrayed to be, executing a woman, and particularly in the electric chair, was no small thing back then. And in fact, she would be the first woman to be sentenced to die in New York in almost 3 decades in the electric chair. And the first one occurred in 1899. And this 1899 was actually the first woman ever to be executed in a electric chair. And that woman went by Martha Place. And so her case, just a quick aside, what did Martha Place do? So February 7th, 1898, her husband comes home. And what he finds is his wife brandishing an axe and rushing at him, attempting to kill him with it. He's just like, honey, I'm home. And then just like axe in your face. So William Place, the husband,
literally an axe murderer.
Yeah, he runs out and runs to go for the police. And so they come back, the police come back, and they find Martha. She's lying on the kitchen floor. She's completely unconscious. She's got like rags and stuff over her face. And she has the gas from the stove on, and seemingly trying to kill herself. And so she was just unconscious from the gas and all that.
The rags were just for fun?
Well, I assume to make it harder to breathe. I don't know. There was things over her face. Either way, so they turn off the gas, kind of air out the house. But unfortunately, this is sort of the other tragic part about this is that they, and why she would ultimately be sentenced to death, is so they go and they look, because there's one other person that's supposed to be home, and that's the 17-year-old daughter of William named Ida. And so Martha was the stepmom. And so William had married her to help, someone help raise his daughter. And Martha she hated Ida, and she frequently threatened to kill her. And this, not exactly the father of the year here, keeping the lady who's threatening to kill his daughter around, but either way. So William actually at one point called the police over the matter, over one of the threats, though nothing came of it at that point. But in this case, unfortunately, she did decide to make good on the threat, and they find Ida, and the sort of the graphic nature of it was what would ultimately see Martha get the electric chairs. So she's not only dead, but Martha had put acid in her eyes and her face, and also her mouth was bleeding, and she had seemingly died from being strangled or asphyxiated in some way.
Oh my,
so
that's horrible.
Either way, so so she ends up getting the electric chair. First woman ever, Martha Place, February, or in 1898 or 1899. Either way, gets the electric chair. First woman ever. Just a little quick trivia for Trivial Pursuit there or something. I'm sure that question's bound to come up in Jeopardy or something.
Electric chair. Do they still do that anywhere?
I don't know. I don't think so. I haven't heard of one in a long time.
I was surprised. I think the gas chamber is still used in some places.
Yeah, I think lethal injection is a lot more common, but
I think I'd rather gas chamber than lethal injection.
Or electric chair most of all, because electric chair, the second they turn on that current, you're not going to be conscious anymore. That's it. But whereas like the lethal injection is like this long process of like various cocktails of chemicals. Yeah, and you're still conscious potentially for part of it, and like it seems much less pleasant. The electric chair, while it's more graphic to watch, as the actual person enduring it, it's it's a flip of a switch, and then you're not feeling anything or conscious at all.
Or firing squad.
Yeah, that's probably the best of all. Just like gun to the head, and there you go. But more traumatic for the person actually pulling the trigger, I suppose. The thing.
Yeah, but I mean, with firing squad, the whole point is you don't know who's pulling the trigger.
Or now with robots, they could probably just make that happen.
Yeah, that's kind of scary though. It's like, what do you got? This is an execution robot.
Yeah, we just put it in the room. You then go in the room, and who's ever in the room, the execution robot tries to kill.
I remember watching a TV show when I was a kid, and they were talking about assisted suicide.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was in Switzerland where it was legal, so people can go and choose to die in Switzerland.
Yeah.
But physicians and stuff didn't want to be killing people, so they had a robot that would do it. So that they'd hook you up to an IV or whatever, and then you'd have a computer, and it would be like, "Are you sure you want to die?" And you'd press yes, and then it would ask you to confirm, and you could press yes again, and it would just push the cocktail or whatever that puts you to sleep. It's like,
like a new, like,
disturbing as a 7-year-old to watch.
That what was it, an Ottoman Empire where that you could outrace
Outrun the gardener,
and if you won the race, he wouldn't kill you. You'd be completely get off scot-free of your crime and go on your merry way.
Yeah, to make it to the walls of the palace grounds or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you didn't make it, he caught you, he'd grab you and strangle you to death.
Yeah, and that's
intense.
So but they had the way to get out. And there was records of some people actually winning the race, even though the gardeners were, they were well trained up in this. But I'm thinking now, robot execution. If you can disable the robot, you get off scot-free, and have like the robot armed. This could.
Wow, that got dark. Yeah. It's like, and we'll televise it, and it'll be called Death Sports.
Exactly, like man versus machine. This is macabre.
Robot Wars.
As macabre as that is, that would be a #1 show.
It would be. It's like those high-speed chases.
Yeah.
Are those still televised?
Yeah, I think so. Like the cops shows and stuff.
Like no. Like I think this is. I don't know. I've never seen it in the UK, and I think maybe we did a video about it or something. When if there's a high-speed chase, you can sign up to a service, and it'll send you like a message on your phone, be like, "There's a high-speed chase. Turn to channel 32."
Exactly.
And it's like, woo, high-speed chase.
And it's like, yeah, exactly. All the people who watch NASCAR just for the wrecks and all that sort of business. Humans.
I don't want to be like morbid, but it is more interesting when there's a crash. I don't want anyone to die.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's pretty exciting.
In this very case, the whole reason this was a nationwide, like, super popular story is because it was totally like the everyman characters. It was like, oh, well, I have a marriage with a spouse I don't like or something. Like, this is just everyone.
I'm a traveling lingerie salesman.
People could relate. And it was just this like, oh, it was all scandalous. And everybody wanted to know about the murder and the affairs and all this. And this, humans love that sort of stuff.
Humans.
Yeah, humans.
Humans humaning.
Exactly. So going back to this, again, there was quite a lot of controversy over Ruth Snyder being sentenced to death, and particularly the electric chair. And in fact, despite, as she had been painted, she was a woman and all that, but as New York State Governor Al Smith, he would justify denying her clemency, stating,
"The execution of this judgment on a woman is so distressing that I had hoped that the appeal to me for executive clemency would disclose some facts which would justify my interference with the processes of the law. But this did not happen."
And then the New York Times editor would later state of this,
"Equal suffrage has put women in a new position. If they are equal with men before the law, they must pay the same penalties as men for transgressing it."
So yes, both of them end up going to the electric chair in Sing Sing on January 12th, 1928.
On the same day?
Yeah, it ran back to back too. Like
intense.
Ruth first, and then they just carried away the body of Ruth, but Judd directly after.
That feels super unnecessary.
Yeah. At least I don't think they had Judd watch. I mean, so that's something. But yeah, the newspaper accounts, again, they like to paint Ruth as this, certain way. And so basically, almost universally, they all say she was hysterical, like trying to get away, and they had to like hold her down and all this sort of stuff. And she was just like completely gone insane at that point. So this is the way they paint her. But, and then Judd, they make it look like he was calm and like like a man. He was taking it like a man and all that. He just went up and, but actually witnesses note that Ruth was also calm.
Is that, hang on. In the notes you wrote something. Is that a quote?
Where?
I don't want to spoil it, but I'll just highlight it for you.
Oh, no, I think that's just something I wrote. Like the outstanding man
you write in the notes, Judd took it like the outstanding man he was. That's good.
In fact, the witnesses they just say Ruth was calm through the whole thing. She, didn't make a fuss, despite literally every newspaper account I could find saying that she was just like completely hysterical and, had gone insane from her, her whole thing at this point. But either way, so she did, Ruth, leading up to her death and everything, did frequently lament that nobody would listen to her. None of the news media believed anything she said. They basically wrote whatever they wanted about her. Whether any of it was accurate at all didn't seem to matter. And
fake news.
And she also hated the fact that Judd was, painted as sort of a saint in this whole thing.
Outstanding, man.
Yeah, such a great guy. So she did give a public statement, which I just include here. I thought it was kind of interesting over her kind of thoughts.
By the way,
the whole thing.
If we ever do any podcast merch, I want to have a t-shirt that says "I'm with Judd." She further publicly stated, "If I were to live over again, I would be what I want my child to be, a good girl, really making the fear of God a guide to a straight life. I said before, go straight, and I mean it more than ever. And I wish a lot of women who may be sinning could come here and see what I have done for myself through sinning, and maybe they would do some of the thinking I have done for months, and they would be satisfied with their homes and would stop wishing for things they should try to get along without when they can't have them. Maybe there are women who have nice homes and husbands who do the best they can for them, even if they don't like their husbands, and they could bear it if they would only make up their minds. Everything can't just be perfect."
So this, I kind of find this quote a little, it's sad, obviously, but like, she's definitely kind of decided that women, they should just get back in the kitchen and be happy with their state in life. It's kind of her, her overarching message, which is really sad. But, facing death row and all that. She's like, yeah, I would rather do that than be going to the electric chair, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. When reading a lot of her quotes and stuff, I was much more sympathetic with her situation than, I don't know, Judd, Team Judd over there. But either way, so hatching a
hashtag free Judd.
Yeah. So
hashtag pardon for Judd.
Yeah. So this brings us to actually something that would also kind of shock the nation. So the New York Daily News, they came up with a little idea. So you have little cameras now. And so they got an out-of-town reporter by the name of Tom Howard from the Chicago Tribune. So basically they wanted someone out of town so no one would recognize him at the police or anything like that. And they gave him a special camera that they strapped to his ankle, kind of hidden under his pants there. And so there he could kind of reveal it a little bit. And then by pointing his shoe at Ruth and then carefully crossing his legs, there was a trigger on his leg. It would then take a one shot. He had one shot basically out of this camera. And so they
had this in like the 1920s. That's cool.
Yeah, and this was kind of a new thing that they had come up with, and it was newly capable. And because no one at this point had ever a real execution via electric chair, no one had footage of it yet. Like certainly had like footage of animals and stuff like that, but not like a person actually being executed, a human. And so this was his idea, or this was their idea, to get a photo of this happening of Ruth in the electric chair. So he chooses the moment right when they flip the switch. So she kind of jerks back. And so the picture he took is a little bit blurry because of it. So she jerks right as he takes the picture. So he times it quite well there. And then the next day, they published this picture in the newspaper. So the first time such a photographic evidence had been, put forth of someone actually, shown being executed by the electric chair. And so, it ended up getting dubbed the most famous sneak shot in all of journalism, and also was the reason that after this, people were searched who were going to watch executions to make sure they didn't have any cameras or anything like that. But he got away with it.
Did you look up the photo?
I did, and it's
pretty spooky. Like, chilling.
It is, and so
surprisingly good.
Yeah, especially for that, and Yeah, it was a good shot. But so the nearly forgotten victim, the one that was often not talked about, is there is that 9-year-old little girl, Ruth Snyder. She goes home from a party with her parents at like 2 a.m. She goes to bed, both alive and well. Then like, I think it was 7 a.m. Her mom's knocking on the door with her head, waking her up. And there her mother is bound and gagged. Her father is dead. And Ruth actually also, she declined to say goodbye to her daughter because, for one thing.
Oh, I've got her confused with Acid Girl. This is their daughter.
No.
The Acid Girl was the axe murderer,
Yeah.
other woman who was
Yeah,
executed.
that was
okay, cool.
Ida, I think her name was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's there, and Ruth declined to say goodbye to her daughter, and this is probably because it looks like Lorraine didn't actually know her mother was getting executed, and she didn't actually know her mother's part in the murder at all either up to this point. She did leave a letter to be given to Lorraine when she was, to quote, old enough to understand, to kind of explain things, but no one knows what this letter said. That was private. And so in the aftermath, there was a custody battle. Albert's brother was like, no one from Ruth's family is getting this little girl. I'm going to get her. But Josephine Brown, Ruth's mother, was like, well, I've been watching her for a couple of years now already. I've been living in the household, so I will take her. And so, yeah, ultimately the daughter was given to Josephine Brown. But yeah, so there was the issue of life insurance. So as we mentioned earlier, there was one real policy for $30,000. It was paid out. That did get paid out because it was legitimate. Albert had opened it. So that's about $435,000 today. But there were the two other policies that at this point were alleged to be forged, and then it was later determined was, and they total about $50,000. So those ended up not getting paid out despite lengthy battles. And the first policy actually took up by a lot of court battles and stuff over the whole thing. So that ended up not benefiting Lorraine much at all, or Josephine. And I tried to actually find out what happened to Lorraine. And it turns out there was a woman who was born around the same time as Lorraine with the same name, who actually lived in Washington, like not actually that far away from me. And she died only a few years ago at the age of, 90, some almost 100. But I think that's not the same woman. It was like close. But some of the other there was disputed birthdays on when Lorraine was actually born, what I was finding, and but it was around that time. But I don't think it's the same because it seemed like it was a little bit too far off, like a half a year or something from any. Okay. But either way, I could not. I did find on like Ancestry.com or something there was a reference to the Lorraine that was definitely the right Lorraine Snyder because the parents' names were listed, but it had no time of death yet. But that might just be because no one recorded it or something.
Maybe she's still alive.
It's possible. She would be like
just really old.
She would be like almost 100. She would be like base 99 or 100. It's possible. The other Lorraine Snyder lived to 96 or 97. So, it's not impossible. It's possible.
God, that'd be weird. Maybe she'll write in.
Oh, yeah. That would be.
Maybe
well, eventually, if she lives much longer, she would start making news just for that reason.
True.
But at least according to Ancestry or whatever website, there was no time of death yet listed.
Ancestry website's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I fell into like an Ancestry hole because they sponsored us 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, and they gave us the free membership, whatever. Yeah. And then I was like, no, I'm paying for this now when it expires. It was really like I got into it, and then I was like, I have to stop because it's really addictive.
Yeah. So. We do have a bonus fact today.
Do
you want to do reviews first?
A quick fact and a bonus? Yes, I do, because then people have to listen to them before we get a bonus fact in. Right. Also, people like it when we read out the reviews. It's also a good reminder to go and leave us a review. You can go do that.
Oh, we should
on iTunes.
We should check that now because we probably passed the 300 or 400. Which one are we on? I can't remember.
It's 300. We most definitely have. We are 309 reviews in.
Oh, well, we got to announce next time we will announce a winner for,
We will do that. So someone has won a $300 Amazon gift card because we said when we get to 300 reviews, we will, like we did at 100 and 200 and 300. So we're going to go through all of the reviews we can find on
all the major platforms.
Like the big platforms.
Yeah, Android or Apple.
If you left a review on like John's podcasting app that's had 4 downloads on the App Store, probably not going to count yours because we can't do that. But if it's on a big one, we'll choose someone.
Yeah.
So leave us a review. Are we going to do it again at 400? It's getting quite expensive.
I think we should like bump because the 200 to 300 happened pretty quick. So we should maybe bump it up to like, 500 or something,
Okay, like, it's probably smart.
Rather than smaller increments because,
Yeah, okay, agreed. So 500 reviews, we'll give away 500.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's a quick business decision made right there. So leave us a review. If you've left us a review already, you're already in the running for that. So that's good for you, I guess. Cool. Leave us a review. Say hi. It doesn't have to be a 5-star or a 4-star or it could be whatever you like, wherever you like. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to read the first few because that's the easiest way. And I'm going to rank them by most recent because it was set to most helpful. Tony Danza, QSA, says, I've been watching the YouTube channel for quite some time and only recently discovered the podcast. I love the banter between Simon and Devon. It's easy to get more of a taste of the guys behind the material being researched. It really balances well with the YT channel. Thank you, Tony. 5 stars. OG Killer, triple 5-star. I'm only leaving you this 5-star review based on the assumption that we revisit Teddy and eventually cover Octavian. Is that like the Roman Emperor?
Yeah.
Is that Roman Emperor?
He was pretty amazing.
Okay. Are we going to cover him?
Might as well. I'm sure there's something I can dig up.
Cool. The show is 5-star worthy. However, failure to keep these promises may make me take your Floyd interpretation to heart. You see, I told you, if I start, hitting on the wall too much, people are going to get angry. But it is bad. I'll just do one more. Reed B117 says, thank you, 5 stars. I've always loved listening to podcasts to learn while driving or walking rather than listen to music, which is pure entertainment. I find that this podcast is a great balance. I've never found myself bored or skipping around while listening. How was that? These were much easier to read than that damn Ruth woman's quote.
Yeah, she definitely needed to learn to use like punctuation and not, have one big sentence for the whole paragraph.
Just running on, just keep on.
In her
running.
defense, she was on death row at the time when she wrote it.
So she's got loads of time.
Yeah, she's got loads of time to read, and this is going to be the last thing people read, probably, of you. So.
You know who'd make a real effort in their statements like this? Judd.
Yeah.
That legend.
What a guy that guy was.
I'm with Judd. Give me my bonus fact. What's up?
All right. So as we mentioned, Martha Place was the first woman to be executed in the electric chair. But it turns out before Martha Place, there were 2 other women who were sentenced to die in the electric chair. One was named Lizzie Halliday and the other Maria Barbella. And they ended up obviously not going to the electric chair. So who were these people? So the first one, Lizzie, she murdered 4 people. She was just kind of an insane person. She eventually gets caught. She was kind of a serial killer a bit, and she was thought to probably have murdered other people. But either way, she gets sent to the electric chair. But then the governor, Roswell Flower, he decides to change it to life sentence in a mental institution, which is really unfortunate for a nurse named Nellie Wicks, because Nellie Wicks ends up getting stabbed 200 times with scissors by Lizzie, who obviously ended up killing her. But otherwise Lizzie spends her time in the mental institution instead of going to the electric chair. So next up,
seems about right.
This one is just kind of like again one of the things that I think a lot of people might sympathize with the woman in this case. Mm-hmm. Maria Barbella, she, unlike Wicks, was not crazy at all. And she was happy to admit her crime, and she also did it in front of several witnesses. And what she did was slit the throat of one Domenico Cataldo. And so why did she want to kill this Cataldo? And so Cataldo, he was courting Place, trying to date her and whatnot. And so eventually he convinces her to go to a boarding house with him. And then supposedly she says, we only have her word on this one because, she murdered him.
He was dead.
He drugged her drink in order to get her to have sex with him. And so they do that. But then afterwards, they end up having an affair for quite some time that way.
It's a good start,
They continue to go to the boarding house many times over time. And so the whole time, though, Barbella is now trying to get Cataldo to marry her. And he keeps just being like, yeah, I'll do that later at some point. And putting it off. And so eventually he basically says, no, I've changed my mind. I don't want to get married. I'm going to return to Italy because they were both Italian. And so he's just going to go back to Italy. And so Barbella's mother then comes into the scene and tries to convince Cataldo to marry her daughter. And instead he says, okay, I'll do it, but you got to pay me $200, which is about $6,000 today. And then he'll marry her. But what neither the mother nor the daughter knew is that Cataldo was already married and he had children and all that back in Italy. And that is why he wanted to return to Italy to go back to them.
Oh my.
Yes. So unfortunately for him, so the morning he's about to board the ship back to Italy, he goes to a saloon to go gambling, and it's approximately 9 a.m. in the morning when he's doing this. And
as you do.
Yeah, Barbella walks in, and she, in front of everyone, is like, you're going to marry me. You're not going back to Italy. And he not only refuses, but according to witnesses, says,
only a pig would marry you.
Naturally, she instantly pulls out a straight razor and slits his throat so fast that witnesses say that he didn't even have time to react. It was just like, a flash of razor, and he was, grasping his throat and no time to speak.
Like an assassin.
Yeah, as you do when someone says only a pig would marry you. So yeah, the whole, woman scorned thing and all that.
Wow.
Yeah. So naturally, the public was kind of on her side on this one. This was the late 19th century and all.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the fact that she ends up getting a trial, though, and they find her guilty, sentenced to death in the electric chair. But she couldn't speak English, only Italian. And so this ended up, and the judge actually advised the jury before they went to find her guilty. Like the judge actually tells them this, and that's not really what judges are supposed to do. So she gets a second trial because of these two factors. And in the second trial, she was found by the jury to be not guilty. The public was definitely on her side on this one. And so afterwards, she marries, has a son, only to have her husband, apparently the bravest man in the world, tells her he's breaking off the relationship and returning to Italy. The thing that Cataldo did. Yeah, at least he didn't call her a pig, though, or say only a pig would marry you.
Yeah, that would be risky.
Yeah, he got away. He left and went to Italy. And then, that was that.
That was intense.
Yeah.
It's a good bonus event.
Yeah.
Good bonus story.
Yeah, I thought so.
Do you have any feedback for today? I didn't have any to add, but it's also because we did the episode ages ago. And I also forgot.
I forgot. There was some stuff I was reading in comments and stuff I wanted to add, but I totally forgot. So next week, definitely do that.
Good. Yeah, we'll be returning to a more normal schedule now. You've moved house and everything.
Yeah,
right?
Reasonably normal. I do have to finish my 2 weeks finally getting my pilot's license. So I have to go away for a few days to do that to the other side of the state to finish. But we're all there.
Good luck.
Yeah. It's an expensive test. Yeah. Rather not fail it the first time.
How much is that test?
All with flight, with the person who checks you out. Which the funny thing about this, you literally get an envelope of cash and you kind of slide it over to them. Like nobody mentions. It's impolite to make you and just kind of slide it over.
What?
This is how it's done. I don't know, but that is how it's done. And everyone's like, "Hey, don't make them ask. They're not going to like to ask. You just slide over the envelope of cash. Presumably they'll go and count it or something."
What, for the test?
For the test. This is how it's done, not with check or anything. So, anyways.
This sounds super corrupt.
Doesn't it? So, that's how you do it. But that I think is like $600 or $700. But then the rental for the plane and the fuel, all total, it's going to come out to like close to $1,000. And you have to, if you fail,
don't fail.
You have to take it again and pay again. And so I'd rather not fail because that's a lot of money either way.
How long's the test?
It can be 2 to 8 hours, depending on how rigorous they want to make it. It includes an oral exam, which can be 2 to 4 hours, and then the flight part, which is the easy part. Although there are like ways you can automatically fail very easily, but like as long as you can avoid those things, it's really, not that hard to fly a plane, really.
I'm sure you'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be great. Definitely.
By the next time we record, maybe you will have this.
No, it's 2 weeks from now, assuming the weather is. That's the problem. Is like I would have been done a couple months ago, but I've literally had like 90% of things canceled because of weather.
Well, good luck. Don't screw up.
No, that would be expensive.
Should we wrap it up?
Sounds good.
Cool. Good to talk to you. We'll be back. Oh, we got no idea what's coming next, right?
No idea at all.
Nah, cool.
Oh wait, no. I do have a good idea.
Oh,
I do, and it's very similar. Well, not similar. It's a murder mystery. This one's an actual murder mystery, like a legitimate, no one knows the answer type of murder mystery, and it's really good. And it was one of the first. I think today I found out things I ever researched. This is like, I don't know. It ended up being like 10,000 words or something. See if you could. You'll know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a good one. And I'm quite happy. I want to revisit it and see if I can dig up any more stuff than from years ago. It's good.
Ah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I remember this one.
Yeah.
If I said the word twice.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, good.
It's a really good one. And I definitely want to see with my more years of experience if I can dig up a little more and see if I can come up with something a little more definitive. Then, it is one of those that no one knows. It is just sort of a murder mystery type thing that it results in something happening twice, as you say.
Well, with that mystery of a teaser, tune in shortly for a murder mystery.
Yeah, it's really interesting and really good.
Subscribe, leave us a review, all that good stuff. And we'll see you in a week or two. Judd took it like the outstanding man he was.